Hi, Shel.
Hi.
Okay, today's daf, Be'ezras Hashem, is daf Kuf Mem Beis in Masechta Baba Basra. Let's just discuss what we're dealing with over here. And basically, we're dealing is that if a woman is pregnant, can the husband gift something to his wife that is pregnant? For example, ha'omer, like we have in the Mishnah, if someone says imtalid ishti zacha, right over here, if my wife will give birth to a boy, yital mana, I'm gifting him, let's call him mana $1,000. Yolda zacha yital mana, then that boy can take $1,000. His father gifted it him, even though when he received the gift, he was his mother was pregnant. Nekeva Messiah. The husband said that if my wife gives birth to a female, I'm giving that female child $2,000, so 200, whatever. So Yoldos Nekeva Naitelis Messiah. The Mishnah says that she is entitled to that 200 when she's born, I guess. So the question we dealt with yesterday with interesting question was, why would a person give more money to his female child than to a male child? Is it better to have a female child than a male child? So the Gemara says sometimes yes, it is, because if you have a girl first, then it's a simin yafal abanim. That was one of the terutzim. But now the Gemara was dealing with how is it possible? Rav Huna said that this Mishnah makes absolutely no sense, because Rav Huna said that who would be the author of such a Mishnah? How could you give something to an unborn child? How could it take effect? How could the acquisition take effect if the child is not here? And the Gemara is stumped by this question. So the Gemara tries a different terutzim and says maybe our Mishnah is the author is Rab Meir. Rab Meir says even if you can gift something to somebody who's not here, but then the Gemara refutes that because Rab Meir would require some part of the person being here. For example, the body of the item that you're dealing with. For example, if you want to acquire the fruits of a tree, so even though the fruits have not been given forth by the tree, you could acquire it because the tree is here. But to gift something to an unborn child, even Rav Meir would hold that it wouldn't work. So who is the author of a Mishnah? So the Gemara pivots and says, "V'lei melei." Let us say our Mishnah is talking about b'mevasreni, that the guy is not giving the money to the child, because obviously you can't give money to an unborn child, to a fetus, but the guy is giving money to the one that's giving him the good news that his wife gave birth. That's what the Mishnah means. He's giving the money to the person that's going to give him the news that his wife gave birth to a boy or a girl. If that's the case, then everything makes sense. But the Gemara says that cannot be the case. In Mahachi, the Mishnah doesn't make sense. The Tani Sefer, the end of the Mishnah says, the end of the Mishnah is talking about, let's say his wife gives birth to a tumtum, and a tumtum is a child that you don't know if it's a male or female, and that is the only child his wife gave birth. So then the Mishnah says that child is going to inherit everything. Then Ein Sham Yarish Elahu, if it's only that child, Yarish Hakoil, that child inherits everything. So, but you see that the Mishnah's topic is not the tail person, the one giving the news, it's dealing with the child. Is the child going to get the inheritance or get the gift or not? So even mevasreini, if the Mishnah is talking about the one that's giving over the news, Yorish Mayavidite, what is he inheriting? He's not inheriting, he's just a strange person giving over the news. So obviously the Mishnah is actually talking about where a person is actually giving money to his fetus. And now we're back to the square one. How is it possible to give money to a fetus, an unborn child? So the Gemara says, "V'lei melei." Let us interpret our Mishnah, b'shiyolda, that what he means to say is like it's like a neder or a promise that he says, the child is obviously as a fetus cannot acquire a gift, but when it's born, I'm committing to give that child 100 or 200. So ihachi, So if that's what you're learning pshat in the Mishnah, the Tani Sefer, the end of the Mishnah says, "V'm'oma kol ma shetelet ishta yishtal, harei ze yital." Anything that my wife will give birth, she should take. Even if my wife will give birth to a tumtum, yital, I'm giving that child. So harei ze yital, that child, even if it's a tumtum, if it's not a male or a female, you're not sure, that child can take the money. It called shatelid, whatever my wife will give birth, call sheyoldam abai, if she gave birth to such a child. Kol shatelid implies that the gift starts when the child is still a fetus, when the baby is in the stomach. Again, we're back to square one. Either way, the way you read the Mishnah, it's very clear that the Mishnah is saying that a guy is gifting a money to a fetus, and the Mishnah and the Rav Huna has no idea how could it ever work. How could you give money to a fetus? You can't say that he's gifting the money that after the baby is born, because the Mishnah says the gift happens before the child is born. So we go to Amud Aleph. Let us say like this: the Amakish that he said. Rav Huna will read the Mishnah. That not that that the Mishnah is talking about the child was born already, because the Mishnah is obviously not talking about the child born when he said it, but the Mishnah is talking about he is saying it and saying that the effect of the gift should take place after the child is born. He said, if my wife will give birth to a boy, then you should give him the gift after it's born. Okay, so that's what the Gemara Mishnah wants to say. And says the Gemara, Rav Huna l'tamei. Rav Huna says is according to his reasoning. And therefore Rav Huna has a problem with this Mishnah. Because when are you saying this statement? When the woman has not yet given birth. And therefore, since you can't give it right now, you can't make it that it'll take effect after the child is born. Rav Huna, af l'kishetelid loikana. After it's born, the child will not be able to acquire that money committed to it when the child was in the mother's stomach. The Amar Rav Nachman says, Hamazaka l'uber, if someone transfers money to a fetus, loikana, the fetus does not acquire it. But if you're saying I'm transferring the money when this fetus is born, kana, it could work. And that's how Rav Nachman is going to read our Mishnah. Rav Huna said, and Rav Huna says, I have no idea how this Mishnah makes sense, because he says, Af l'kishetelid loikana. Even if you say that I'm transferring the money to the child after it's born, but when you said it, the child was a fetus, it wouldn't work. The acquisition is not effective. So Rav Huna has a problem with our Mishnah. Now comes along a third opinion, and this third opinion is the topic of today. Rav Sheshes Amar, Rav Sheshes says, Echad zeh, the Echad zeh kana, whether the child is born or whether the child is unborn, a fetus, kana, the child acquires the gift. So basically, Rav Sheshes is of a very strict opinion, not a strict opinion, but a very interesting opinion. And Rav Sheshes' opinion is, hi Louis, we just began, and we're just discussing over here Rav Sheshes' his opinion. Rav Sheshes has an opinion that one can gift a money to an unborn child, a fetus. It's an unborn child, and I'm gifting money to that unborn child, and it works. And that's how Rav Sheshes sees it, and he can easily interpret our Mishnah.
Where are you?
We're up to Kuf Mem Beis Amud Aleph, and we're up to Amar Rav Sheshes. It's like a few lines down from the top.
Okay.
Rav Sheshes said, "Mina aminallah." How do I know that there's a concept of a child who's a fetus, unborn child, could actually acquire things? It's very interesting. Judaism looks as an unborn child as something that's not a human being, right? I don't think if someone kills an unborn child, the Chumash says you don't get misa for that. All you do is pay the father money. if someone whacks somebody's pregnant wife and causes a miscarriage, you just pay money to the husband. That's what the Chumash says. And yet, our Gemara is discussing whether if you committed to gift an unborn child, that money belongs to that unborn child. So how do you know that? Rav Shesha says, how do I know that concept? The Tanya, we learned in the Brisa like this: Ger shemes, a ger, a convert that died. Now, a convert that dies and he has low relatives, everybody could loot his assets, could keep it. It becomes hefker. So what happens like this? You have a ger shemes, a ger died, uvizbuzu Yisrael nechasov, and all the Jews came and looted his property. After looting his property, they acquired it. Let's say somebody picked up his motorcycle and now claims it's his. Vishamu, they heard, sheyesh ben, he has a son. He actually has an inheritor. Or here's the key, his wife was pregnant. Okay, so really the acquisition's not good. Chayovim lahachzar, they required to return back the money to the property of the ger because his wife is pregnant, and presumably that unborn child inherited everything. Oh, that's the key point over here. And therefore, they stole from the unborn child because that unborn child inherited his father. So therefore, they have to return it back to the property of the ger. Hechziru hakol. Let's say they returned everything back to the property of the ger. Okay, they returned everything. And the unborn child died. Or the child died, or the wife of the ger miscarried. So therefore, now there's no inheritor over here. So then they have to redo the acquisition. They have to come back to the ger's property and take back the motorcycle. If they do it a second time, they get it. But the first time, it didn't work. Why the first time didn't work? Because when they lifted the motorcycle, let's say, and tried to take it, the wife was pregnant at that time. So who's really inheriting that motorcycle? That belongs to the unborn child. So what you see from this brisa, that an unborn child is like a regular human being. It acquires things. And this unborn child acquired his father's motorcycle, his father, the ger's motorcycle. And therefore, whoever tried to take it away from him didn't do anything. It's only after they heard that the woman, the wife of the ger, died, then, only then, can they acquire that item. So we see from there that an unborn child can acquire things, and that's the source of Rav Sheshes. That's what Rav Sheshes concludes. If you want to say, Uber Laikani, a fetus does not acquire anything, Lama Luhu Lachzuki Bishniya. Why do they have to acquire it the second time? The first time they acquired it was good, because when the ger died, his wife was just pregnant. And if you want to say that the fetus didn't inherit anything, so when they acquired it the first time, they lifted it up, the item, and claimed it, so that was good enough. And then when you heard that the wife did not give birth to any child, so then that should be good enough. Why do they have to redo it a second time? It must be that when the woman was pregnant, the fetus actually acquired the acquisition, because a fetus could acquire things. So that's the source of Rav Sheshes. Omar Abaya said, not so fast. I agree with you, Rav Sheshes, that a fetus could acquire things, but only if it's an inheritance, where it comes by itself. But Omar Abaya, Rusha haba me'eleh shani. A Rusha, an inheritance that comes naturally, then I agree with you. A fetus could acquire it. But if you want to gift a fetus, a strange man wants to gift a fetus to a certain amount of money, that's not going to work. That's the difference. That's Abaya says. Rava says another teretz. Rava says an interesting thing. He says, really, a fetus cannot acquire anything. In other words, not only a gift, but even an inheritance. So then the question is, then why do these people who grab the items they grabbed it why do they have to redo the acquisition? They lifted it already the first time, and the fetus didn't acquire it because, according to Rava, in an inheritance, a fetus does not acquire an inheritance, doesn't acquire anything. A fetus cannot acquire anything. Shanu Hasan, the difference is the Rapuya Merapim Bidei Mi'ikore. That means Mi'ikara. That means when they did it the first time, the guys that heard that the ger died, when they lifted the items to acquire it, they didn't do it with their full heart. They were thinking maybe the ger has an inheritor. So when they lifted it, they didn't have in mind that they're going to acquire this asset. That's why they have to redo it again, when they know for a fact that the ger left over nobody. So that's the reason why. But the fact that the main point is that, according to Rava, the Uber itself didn't acquire anything. It's just they're mistaken, thinking that maybe it did, or maybe there's another inheritor. That's why the first time they acquired it wasn't good enough. They have to redo it again. My benayu, what's the difference between Abai and Rava? So in particularly over here, Ika benayu, in this case, I'll give you an example. Shishama boy shemes. Let's say the ger, when he died, they heard that his wife was pregnant. Correct. Then they heard that the wife's miscarried. Okay, v'loy mes, and the wife did not miscarry, but they thought that the wife miscarried, so they acquired it. They thought they acquired it, but really the fetus did not acquire it. They did not die, and after they acquired it, then we find out that the fetus really died. So according to Rava, when they did the first acquisition, they were doing it under the assumption that the fetus died already. So they made a full acquisition thinking that there is no inheritor over here. So then it works, because Rava holds and the fetus doesn't acquire anything, and their first acquisition is valid. But according to Abaya says a fetus could acquire something in inheritance. So when they made the first acquisition, the fetus was still there. And therefore, it's after they made the first acquisition, then the fetus died, they'll have to make a new acquisition according to Abaya. Okay, the Gemara is asking a question against Rav Sheshes. Now the Gemara is asking a question against Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes said that a fetus could acquire something, could inherit something at the very least. So Tashma, come in here. Tinik ben yoim echad noichel lemanchel. This Brisa says a 1-year-old baby, only a 1-year-old baby, could inherit, and if that 1-year-old baby dies, his brothers inherit him. He could bequeath. So this Mishnah, or it's a Brisa, says clearly ben yoim echad only if it's 1 day old, it could inherit uber, but if it's just a fetus, loy. So it would not inherit anything. So this is a question against Rav Sheshes. Answers the Gemara, Amar Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes answered this in Masechta Nida. What we're talking about over here is a specific case, which only it makes sense if it's a baby that was born already and not an uber. In other words, an uber could inherit, but here we're talking about over here is that a man, let's say Yaakov had 2 wives, right? We have Yaakov having 2 wives, Rachel and Leah. Leah had Reuven and Shimon, and Leah and Rachel had Yosef. Now, what happened was over here, Yaakov died. Then Rachel was pregnant with Yosef and gave birth to Yosef. Then Rachel died. So Yosef inherited his mother because it's his mother. And then Yosef died. Then if Yosef died, Reuven and Shimon, his half-brothers from the same father, will inherit him. That could only work if actually Yosef was born. But here is the Mishnah is going to tell you that that this Mishnah is going to tell you that's only possible if Yosef was born. But a fascinating thing the Gemara is telling you, that when a woman who's pregnant dies of natural causes, you should know that the woman the child dies first, the fetus dies first, and then the woman. So therefore, if the fetus dies first, then the woman, so then he never inherited his mother. So therefore, he never inherited his mother, and therefore, the assets will not transfer over to Yosef's or the Reuven and Shimon. The dafka ben yom echad, only if he was born already. Aval uber loy, but if his mother was just pregnant, then he wouldn't inherit his mother simply because he died before his mother died. My tama, what's the reason? We go to Amud Beis. The Gemara says that who my inspiration. When you have a pregnant lady who dies of natural causes, a pregnant lady dying from natural causes, it dies first, and the fetus dies first, and then the mother. The ein haben yarish asima bekevel lahanchla achim and av, and therefore that fetus never inherited anything because it died before his mother, so it never gets transferred to his brothers from his father. So the Gemara says, and that's what that Mishnah brings. But really, you could inherit. Remember, the Humai inspiration. Do you always say that when a woman dies, when a pregnant woman dies, the fetus dies first? Is that always true? There was a story, upirchis plus upirchuse, and the fetus actually, the mother died, and then the baby was born, the fetus was born and lived for a few minutes and then died. So how did we saw it moving around? So we see that sometimes the mother dies first and then the fetus. That's not always true. When you chop the tail of a certain worm, it jumps around too. It's not really alive. It's just nerve endings jumping around. But really, a pregnant woman who dies of natural causes, the fetus dies first and then the mother. That's one teretz to answer that question. Rav Yosef said in the name of Rava, another answer to that Mishnah, that only a son that's born does something, not an uber, not a fetus. It minimizes, reduces the part belonging to the Bechar. Because normally a Bechar will take Pi Shnayim. A Bechar will take Pi Shnayim. So a Bechar takes Pi Shnayim, let's work it out, that if the father left over, let's say $1,200, so if there are two children, the older brother, the Bechar will take 800, the younger brother will take 400. If there are three children, then the oldest brother will take 600, and each of the remaining children will take 300 apiece. Now, if one of the child dies, so then the child that was born, the one of the child dies, so then that 3 is split between the oldest child and the second child. So if the youngest child dies, supposedly, so then that 3 that he got, that $300 he got, 150 will go to one brother and 150 to another brother. So it comes out that the oldest brother gets 750. However, that's only if he died after he was born. But let's say he died, that third brother died while he was still a fetus. So then, since this 1,200 still being divvied up by the father, that doesn't reduce the portion belonging to the Bechar, and we view it as if he was never existed, and therefore the Bechar will take 800 instead of 750, and the other brother will take 400. The dafka ben yamecha, this only works if a child was born. But a pregnant woman, a fetus not. My tama, the yoldaloy amarachmana. The Torah describes the Bechar. That's the only ones that minimize the amount a Bechar gets to take is only if the child was born already. But if the child was not born, it doesn't reduce the amount the Bechar is supposed to get. And if that child never gets born, we view it as if it never existed. The Amar Mar Berei Rav Yosef Mishmei de Rava Ben Shenoiled La Acha Mises Yovev Einam Amayel Bechel Bechara My Tama V'Yodaloi. Let's say you have a son that's born after the father died. Let's say the father died, and then another child was born. So now we have more children to split the estate. So will that minimize now the Bachar's piece? Because now you're dealing with another kid. The answer is review as if he wasn't born yet, and we divide up the assets prior to him being born, and we give the Bechor, we'll take a Pishnayim as if that child wasn't born yet. And then whatever's left over is divided amongst the other children after that child is born. Because since that child was not born and the Bechor was still around, the Bechor grabs the Pishnayim. It's only a child that was born in this world that has the ability to reduce the amount the Bechor takes. Basura Masnahachim, Basura, that was the version that they learned. But in Pumbedisa, they had this version of the halacha. A Bechor that was born after the father died, he doesn't take pishnayim. My tama yakir Omar Rachman. Torah says that you have to recognize the child that it was born. If he wasn't born, he can't, recognize that there is a Bechor over here. We paskin like everything that Rav said in the name of Rava. And presumably a Bechor that's born after the father died doesn't take pishnayim, a Bechor, here's another idea. A Bechor that was born after the father died. Let's say the father died and left over a bunch of pregnant ladies, and then the Bechor was born, right? And then other children were born from other wives. So there's no Bechor over there, because when the father died, there was no Bechor. So that is the one way we paskin. A Bechor that was born after the father dies doesn't take pishnayim. A ben that was born after the father died does not reduce the amount of Bechorah. That's the Gemara's conclusion. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, let's finish up another minute. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Hamazake leubar, if you transfer money to a fetus, loikana, it doesn't work. Our Mishnah says it does work. The answer is it only works if it's your own child. And therefore you have a superpower as a father to transfer money to your unborn child. But a stranger does not have that power to do that. A person's very close to his son, so he has a superpower that can be able to transfer over money to his son. Concludes the Gemara. Amalei Shmuel Rav Chana Bagdasai. Rav Shmuel said to Rav Chana from Baghdad, Puk Aisli Beyasara, I want you to bring me 10 people, the Emelach Bapei, and I'm saying this proud halacha. Hamazaka leubar kana. Shmuel says, you could transfer money to a fetus, and it works. He acquires it. Concludes the Gemara, it's not true. The Hilchah said the halacha remains, Hamazaka leubar loikana. You transfer money to a fetus, it does not work. Okay, so that concludes this topic.
Thank you.